Good morning, everyone. We are delighted to see all of you here and to add my word of welcome to Ashvin's on behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation and thank our summit partners, Charles Goddard and the others in the Economist Intelligence Unit. I'd also like to express my sincere appreciation to the government of Singapore for providing us not only with this wonderful city in which to meet, but really a vibrant backdrop upon which to hold these conversations on urban resilience. It's all the more special that we do so on the eve of Singapore's 50th anniversary. In many ways, Singapore's 50-year history has been an accelerated case study of investing in resilience as a strategy for urban transformation. But continued investment in building resilience will become more critical, even more critical, I think, as Singapore's leaders chart its next 50 years. Because of the intersecting forces of globalization and climate change, crisis has become the new normal, and cities are caught in its crosshairs. Globally, we don't see a week that goes by that somewhere in the world there isn't some kind of disturbance to the normal flow of things. A cyber attack, a new strain of virus, a structural failure, a violent storm or a civil conflict, an economic blow or a natural system threatened. These shocks tend to exacerbate the more slowly developing chronic stresses that many cities experience: inequality, poor air, traffic congestion, water scarcity, strains on infrastructure, just to name a few. And these stresses, in turn, weaken a city's ability to respond to and to bounce back from future shocks. This cycle has left many cities around the world lurching from crisis to crisis. And nowhere have these cities felt these impacts more acutely than here in Asia. Over the last 3 decades, Asia has accounted for 38% of global economic losses due to natural disasters alone. By mid-century, the region could face annual disaster losses in excess of $19 billion. These numbers are expected to increase as Asia is poised to become home to 21 of the world's 37 megacities by 2025. But not every disruption has to become a disaster. And not every stress has to weaken the urban fabric. By building resilience, cities can shift the paradigm from one of disaster response and relief to one of prevention and returns. Let me give you an example from the Rockefeller-supported Asian Cities Climate Change Resilience Network, or ACCCRN, whose work we celebrate at this summit. We launched this initiative in 2008, focusing on a pilot group of 10 cities in India, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. And now there are 40 cities in 2 more countries, the Philippines and Bangladesh. In these cities, ACCCRN worked with stakeholders to develop, to test, and to demonstrate practical strategies for responding to the impacts of climate change. One of those cities, Gorakhpur, India, is an extraordinary case history. Gorakhpur is a town of about 1 million people in a low-lying area in the foothills of the Nepal Himalayas. Each year, monsoons dump heavy rainfalls on the city. As much as 1/5 of the city is often submerged, often for months at a time. Standing water does more than disrupt normal activity, of course. It also increases vector-borne diseases, contaminates groundwater, and degrades agricultural yields. And it's getting worse. Over the last decade, a rapid influx of people and poor waste management has extended waterlogging and its impacts. But in Mahewa, one of the most flood-prone wards of the city, residents have become active participants in the solution. Working with local NGOs, the city administration, and researchers, community members have surveyed households. They've identified innovative and affordable solutions and established local partnerships and committees to create interventions in their areas of greatest concerns. One intervention created a much-needed waste management system. Local residents donated 3 plots of land where waste is now separated and properly disposed of. Each household pays a very small amount for waste collection. Now, fewer bottles, pieces of plastic, and other garbage end up in the city's drainage system. In addition to waste and drainage improvements, other interventions have focused on health, on agriculture, and on microcredit. As a result, when 113-year record rainfall hit Gorakhpur in 2013, residents of Mahewah were spared. But that wasn't all that was achieved. Farmers now use compost from the properly disposed waste to fertilize their crops and protect against damaging pests. 900 households have gained access to safe and clean drinking water. And the incidence of waterborne disease and sickness has been greatly reduced. One investment, multiple benefits, that's the resilience dividend. Because it's just that, a return on investment. And it shows that by investing in resilience, communities, businesses, cities can improve lives and assets on the front end and generate returns at every point in between. For a physical example of the resilience dividend, make a visit here in Singapore to the Marina Barrage, a dam built across the Marina Channel in downtown Singapore. Opened in 2008, the dam does more than prevent flooding, although it does that quite well. It also provides the island's largest catchment area for fresh water, which has decreased Singapore's dependence on importing drinking water from its neighbors. What's more, the protected waterfront now offers excellent new green space for recreational activities and scenic views. From community interventions to multi-use infrastructure, these are 2 examples of how investments in flood protection can reap a resilience dividend for cities at 2 very different places in their phases of development. But flood prevention isn't the only investment cities can make to reap the resilience dividend. The possibilities are indeed as unique as the cities themselves. Christchurch, New Zealand is leveraging their process for rebuilding after a devastating recent earthquake to build a more participatory democracy. Medellin, Colombia has integrated transit systems with economic centers to dramatically bring down their crime rates. While there's no single template to follow to build resilience, there are 5 characteristics that resilient cities share. First, a resilient city is aware of its vulnerabilities and assets. It has both the willingness and the ability to assess, to take in new information, and to adjust to that information using monitoring and feedback loops to do real-time situational analysis. Second, it has diverse and often redundant types of backups and alternatives so that if one part of the system is challenged, it can rely on this other part without disruption. Third, it fosters integration by sharing information and ensuring coordinated action across all sectors of government and between government and all sectors of society, especially the private sector and its citizens. The left hand knows what the right hand is doing, and they're working together from the same playbook towards the same goals. Fourth, it has built the capacity for self-regulation, meaning that if one part of the system fails, the entity can be delinked, the failing entity can be delinked to keep that problem from spreading. That is the difference between failing safely and failing catastrophically. Finally, a city can adapt if it is resilient. It has the capacity to adjust to the changing number of circumstances by developing new plans, taking new action, or modifying past behaviors. The entity is flexible. It bends, not breaks. These 5 characteristics, I would argue, are equally important for business to succeed in the 21st century. According to data that will be unveiled by the Economist Intelligence Unit later today, business leaders are increasingly seeing the benefits of investing in resilience, including greater competitiveness, stronger reputations, and the increased productivity and health of workers. That's the resilience dividend. Businesses can generate these dividends in at least 3 ways. First, by taking steps to build their own resilience. There are lessons to learn here from many, but let me use as an example Toyota Motor Company. Before the Japanese earthquake in 2011, the automaker had learned from past crises and established disaster response task forces in every one of its operational units. In addition to disaster planning, the leadership had taken care to build the kind of culture that empowered its employees and its suppliers to gather and share information, to make quick decisions, and to do what was needed to get parts ready to deliver cars to customers during the good times, as well as during times of crisis. These critical investments contributed to Toyota rising to #1 car manufacturer before the earthquake, and it is what allowed the company to regain that position after dropping to #4 after the earthquake, only 2 years later, while many see the rest of Japan still struggling to recover. That's the resilience dividend. Second, the private sector can reap the resilience dividend by developing and manufacturing products and services necessary for building resilience. Later today, we'll introduce you to some of our platform partners who are making their services and their technologies available to 100 resilient cities, from technologies that allow cities to map vulnerabilities to services that help cities determine where to focus their limited financial resources. Palantir, a data analytics software company, is one such partner already on the 100RC platform. In disaster situations, Palantir's applications provide responders with updated information to know where to help and where resources are more needed. This has enabled more responsive and more coordinated disaster relief efforts in the aftermath of both Typhoon Haiyan and Superstorm Sandy, 2 very different events. Now cities are using Palantir's technology both to help manage information after crises, but also in times of calm to help in better planning. That's the resilience dividend. Indeed, resilience provides a new market opportunity, I would argue, for businesses to innovate products and solutions with a growing set of prospective customers, households, communities, and cities. A third way the private sector can achieve resilience dividends for themselves and for others is by contributing to the resilience of the communities in which they operate. In Bogota, Colombia, global brewing and beverage company SAB Miller found that the cost of water from the local utility was rising precipitously. The culprit? Upstream, dairy farmers were clearing land for their cows to graze, and as a result, loads of sediment were traveling downstream, disrupting the water supply. The situation could easily have led to a crisis, and indeed the potential loss of a major local business for Bogota, because SAB Miller considered moving. Instead, they joined with the local water utility and with the Nature Conservancy to support the dairy farmers in adopting new practices. For example, they supported the farmers purchasing high-producing cows, keeping smaller herds, and protecting the vegetation along the riverbanks. Through this investment in higher-producing herds and watershed protection, the water utilities saved $4 million a year, passing on many of those savings to SAB Miller and their water purchases. But that wasn't all. With better practices, the dairy farmers increased their own efficiency, the ecology of the river system improved. Multiple wins for a single investment. That's the resilience dividend. But in order to solve the breadth of our resilience challenges, we'll need more examples like these and much, much more cross-sector integration. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit survey, 90% of business leaders globally, and an even higher percentage in Asia, acknowledge that they have a role to play in building the resilience of cities in response to climate change. And while a full 75% of the respondents expressed a likelihood of engaging in cross-sectoral partnerships to address these challenges over the next 5 years, we need to ensure that this occurs. We need to ensure that the gap between awareness and action really is filled in the years ahead. That is why your presence at this summit is so very important. We need to close that gap in Asia and beyond. For the model of a city where business and government have successfully integrated their planning and are reaping the benefits, even in the good times, look to San Francisco in our first cohort of 100 resilient cities. The City's Lifeline Council is an integrated planning process among all departments of city government and all of the city's businesses to facilitate self-regulation and rapid restoration of basic services from electricity and power to water and communication to sanitation and transportation, a city's lifelines in the aftermath of disruption. This planning will be useful whether that disruption is an earthquake, an act of terrorism, or a severe weather condition. What's more, San Francisco is intentionally benefiting from integrating the strategies of its growing sharing economy businesses, such as rideshare company Lyft and home share company Airbnb, in all of its planning, because obviously their business model is built on a resilience principle, the effective use of excess capacity. Whether you're a city as advanced in your resilience planning as Singapore or San Francisco, or a city that's just beginning, realizing the resilience dividend is available and it will happen, but it will take a great deal of integration. First, integration with the private sector, and then integration with all of the sectors, NGOs, civil society, community leaders. This is true for building resilience everywhere, but it is absolutely, especially true for cities, because so many different facets of society are interconnected in cities, reside in close proximity, and ultimately share a common future. That is the reason we've brought a diverse group here today, to identify collaborative solutions to forge paths for new partnerships. There's a great idea that emerges from your conversations today. We at the Rockefeller Foundation are committed to working with you to bringing those ideas forward. I know it is true that together we can achieve the resilience dividend to improve the lives and the livelihoods of people in more cities around the world. Thank you so much for joining us.